Anyway, I was very sad to hear that former President Carter is now in hospice. He's decided that at age 98 he's had enough dealing with all the health problems and stuff. So it's going to be a very, very sad day when he finally passes away. And when it's hospice, it's pretty close to the end. And anyway, he's a great man. He still is. And I actually met him once in Reno, Nevada, when he was raising money for his son Jack, when Jack ran for the U.S. Senate and lost against then Senator John Ensign, who happened to screw himself out of a job, as we know, because he was revealed to have had an extramarital affair. So I met the former president. It was at a fundraiser in Reno. It was at a man's house, and he was a wealthy attorney, I think. I don't remember the details, but of where it was. But anyway, it was a memorable moment. I gave $250 to the campaign, but I didn't give $500. But I had my picture taken with the former president. But what happened is that I didn't give enough money to have a copy of my picture taken with the former president. But I sure as heck didn't know how to talk to him. You say Mr. President, hello, Mr. President, da-da-da-da. No, I said, hi, how are you? Oh, God, he was such a great guy. The whole family. I just have nothing but the highest regard for them. I met his granddaughter and grandson. I met Jack and his wife, and the whole family. Rosalind was there too. I didn't get a chance to talk to her one-on-one, and that was at a different event. But it's a memory, and although I've had a very dull life, I've had some interesting aspects of that dull life. But I'm just sad that he's in hospice care. He may end up living to 100. I doubt it, but he did a lot of good in the world, and I just wish we had more people like him. Anyway, that's my memory of former President Carter. And getting back from politics into this ludicrous stuff that I happened to come across about Roald, yeah, it's pronounced Roald Dahl, and his books, because they're considered offensive to some people, because he didn't have the mental telepathy to predict what people 60 years later after he wrote the books were going to think about people's feelings and all this other crap. Roald Dahl, and this is going to be kind of a long video, because I want to go out on a little bit of a tangent here. But Roald Dahl was kind of an oddball, okay, but he also was wildly imaginative. As one of the groups that I did for my school, and I did like a 5th grade novel studies class, and one of the groups I had, we studied James and the Giant Peach. And it's wildly imaginative. I'm not going to mention the plot or anything, but Dahl was just fantastic. You can't find a better author for children than Roald Dahl. And I'm sorry, I feel bad for J.K. Rowling, but she isn't half the writer that Roald Dahl was. And not only that, but he did it much more economically than she did it. Of course, his books were maybe a little bit younger than hers, but I think her books need more of an editor to them. But he was something. And he was something else. During his career, as he was embarking on his children's book career, he hosted a show that was a live television show, and it was called Way Out, and it was broadcast during the summer of 1961, I think it was. Yeah, it says here. And those stories were damn weird. And I don't know if he wrote the scripts of any of them. I think he might have, a la some other people, or was involved in it. But he hosted the show, and he must have smoked 20 packs of cigarettes a day. And you get all this waft of smoke, and then here he'd come on, and he just came across as creepy. Okay, kind of like Rod Serling in a way, was a little bit creepy. And all that, regardless of whether they really were creepy. But at the time, he was married to Patricia Neal, and that's where I'm going to segue out, but we'll stay kind of on topic right here. He was married to her quite a few years, and they had 5 kids. And of those 5 kids, one of them died of measles, as I recall, and that hit him and his wife, Pat Neal, very hard. And then they had a son, I think Theo, who was hit by a car and had some brain damage, as I recall. He's still alive, as so far as I know. But they faced that. And then the haymaker was when Patricia Neal had a stroke. She was still in her 30s. She had a series of strokes, and it was just about the end of her. But Roald Dahl stayed beside her. He encouraged her. He was admired all over the world because he helped get her back on track, and she made a full recovery from those strokes. Eventually, the marriage went kaput, and he ended up marrying one of her best friends, and I think she's still around, his widow. But Dahl then died in 1990 of a rare form of cancer. But out of all that tragedy, he wrote those wonderful books. And what a rotten thing to do, to try to rewrite his books to not offend people. Good fucking Lord. That's like colorizing classic movies. It's actually worse. You rewrite books that the author never intended. And if he used words that weren't very nice, well, that's the way it is. You could use that as a teachable moment. As a teacher. And say, this is how people were then. You know, he didn't have the foresight. That's like Dr. Seuss, and they did all that crap with Dr. Seuss. Try to turn him into the most vile thing that ever lived. And I'm sick of it. This is all presentism stuff. This is not history. This is not truth. This is something way off, you know, and way off the beam. But anyway, getting back to Dahl, that's kind of my comment about that. But I found that, you know, Patricia Neal, the actress, and I think she died in 2010, and she had a very interesting life. And before she met Dahl, as everybody knows, if you're into Hollywood gossip or Hollywood history, she had a big affair with Gary Cooper. I never thought Gary Cooper was all that attractive. I never did. Not even as a young guy, but, you know, that's me. But anyway, they had this torrid affair, and they started it during the filming of The Fountainhead, which was one of the worst damn movies ever made. The book was one of the worst books ever written by our friend Ayn Rand, who, you can't say the movie distorted the book because she wrote the screenplay for the movie. So you can't say they took her out of context or anything. Oh my God, it was a crappy movie. But that's where the affair began between Neal and Cooper. So they had this affair for a couple of years. And I guess at one point she got pregnant. She had an abortion. And I'm going back to her book, As I Am. That was her autobiography. And she regretted that. But, you know, I mean, realistically, as a single actress, I mean, look what happened to Ingrid Bergman. Yeah. So, I mean, Patricia Neal couldn't do that. So, Anyway, Cooper almost left his wife for her. His wife was Veronica Rocky, as she was known, Balfe, and she had been an actress. And so they married in the early 30s. She was about 10 years younger than him. And they had a daughter named Maria. And Maria might still be alive. She's pretty old if she is. But I'd have to look it up. But Cooper had actually separated. And then he realized, maybe that's not such a good idea. And he really loved his daughter. That was his only child. And so he went back to Rocky and Maria. And later on, he converted to Catholicism. So they were all very much into the Catholic faith. And that was for real. And I have never read anything where Cooper fell off the wagon on marital fidelity after they reconciled. So anyway, they went along, and then he died of cancer in 1961, and he looked old anyway. He looked old in The Fountainhead. I mean, Patricia Neal was quite a bit younger than him. She was about 25 years his junior, but she looked older. Everybody smoked in those days, and, it kind of put the miles on people, even if you were in your 20s. And he really started looking old then. And then, of course, he looked even worse because he was sick. So anyway, she had that affair, and it was over, and then she married Roald Dahl. And that was, in her book, she never regretted either relationship there. And she had those 5 kids, and she was happy. And even with the tragedies and stuff, and then the marriage went kaput. But anyway, it was well known, that she had that affair with Cooper, and apparently, rumor had it, or the story had it, that his daughter Maria literally spat on her. She hated her because, well, for obvious reasons. She spat on her. Fast forward about 20 years. And old Patricia Neal, I think she was in New York or something, and she was walking down the street, I think it was, and she ran into Gary Cooper's daughter. And it was they had a very good talk, and Maria asked her, if she'd invited her to visit her mother, and who was living in New York. She had remarried a famous surgeon. I think his name was Dr. John Converse. Not too long after Coop died. And that was going to pose a little bit of a problem because he was based in New York, and Gary Cooper was buried in Hollywood, but that didn't stop Rocky, as Veronica Balfe Cooper was known, Converse was known. She just had his remains moved to New York. And that's where he's buried, and that's where she's buried, because she died around 2000 or 2001, something like that. So, anyway, Patricia Neal went to the apartment. I think it was an apartment where Veronica or Rocky Balfe Cooper Converse lived. And they had a really good conversation. And they had a really good talk. I think she only met her, the 2 women only met each other once. And Neal was very impressed with her photographic skills and stuff because Rocky Cooper was quite an accomplished photographer. She was a woman of quite a bit of substance. And how that was that she forgave her for having that affair with Coop, and Maria forgave her for having that affair with Coop. It just blows you away how that was. How her whole life, most people would say, oh, crap, I would not want anything to do with that creep again. He used me, abused me, blah, 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 blah. But it's something how that he had an influence on her life, on Patricia Neal's life, that she couldn't possibly have seen when she was young. And so that it came full circle. And then Maria Cooper, Janice, I think was her last name, she was close friends, if not best friends, with Mother Dolores. who was the actress Dolores Hart, who had some success in Hollywood. I think the movie was Flaming Star that she was in with Elvis, and she was in a few other films. And then she decided to give it up to join the convent, and she had been engaged to a man who was really in love with her, but he respected her choice. She went to the convent, but he would visit her at least once a year until he passed away. He never married or had kids. And that was quite a story in and of itself. So there's all these side stories. And anyway, so Pat Neal got acquainted with Mother Dolores, and she would go to that convent and I think it was Connecticut, and they would, in the Abbey, and she got involved with all kinds of dramatic stuff and all kinds of things. And she wrote her autobiography there, and she also wanted to be buried there, but she wasn't Catholic. And she couldn't be buried there if she wasn't Catholic, but a few months before she passed away, in around 2010, she did convert. And so she's buried there at that Abbey in Connecticut. And they honor her there. I think the theater is named after her, all this kind of stuff. But what a story that was with Patricia Neal, who was married to Roald Dahl, whose work is being screwed over by these nitwits. And let's take a look. I know I went way off the beam here, but I wanted to get all that in about Patricia Neal, because I just thought that was fascinating. She had quite a fascinating life. Anyway, Puffin, the publisher, has hired sensitivity readers to rewrite chunks of the author's text to make sure the books can continue to be enjoyed by all today, resulting in extensive changes across Dahl's work. Edits have been made to descriptions of characters' physical appearances. The word fat has been cut from every new edition of relevant books, while the word ugly has also been culled, the Daily Telegraph reported. And I tried to get into the Daily Telegraph, and of course it's under a paywall. Anyway, Augustus Gloop in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is now described as enormous. In the Twits, Mrs. Twit is no longer ugly and beastly, but just beastly. Hundreds of changes have been made to the original text, and some passages not written by Dahl have been added. But the Roald Dahl Story Company said it's not unusual to review the language during a new print run, and any changes were small and carefully considered. This should not be done. This is sacrilege. I'm sorry. You know, they don't dare touch Mark Twain because he used the N-word in Huckleberry Finn and in Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of. They don't dare tamper with that because it's a teachable moment. When they're using stuff like this that may not seem appropriate now. You don't change his intent. You don't change somebody's words. That's totally wrong, what they're doing to Roald Dahl. Totally wrong. Anyway, that is all I have to say for today.